terms of making sure the communities are prepared and people are given the tools that they need to help take action themselves and make sure that we remain, certainly here in Montclair and throughout the state, a welcoming community, a community that understands diversity is our strength. So with that, I'll do a quick introduction of our esteemed panel. First, we have Scott Richmond. Scott is the New York, New Jersey Regional Director for the Anti-Defamation League. Scott, you want to give a quick wave? There you go.
Great to be here. Thanks.
That's right. Thanks for being on. Next, we have Dr. Denellery. I'll get that right, Dr. Denellery. Johnson Faniel. Dr. Johnson Faniel is the New Jersey Division of Civilian Rights, Attorney General's Law and Public Safety Director of Outreach and Community Relations. Dr. Johnson Faniel, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have Izzy Chaudhry. Izzy is a detective with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, everyone.
We also have Brendan W. Gill. Brendan Gill is Essex County Freeholder Commissioner now at large. And Brendan, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Mayor.
All right. Weldon Powell is the Chief of Detectives at the Division of Criminal Justice. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We also have right from here in Montclair, Lieutenant Tyrone Williams. Lieutenant Williams is from the Montclair Police Department. Lieutenant, good to see you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor.
Ted Stevens. Ted Stevens is no stranger to us here in Montclair. We've known him from his previous positions, and now he serves as our Essex County Prosecutor. Mr. Prosecutor, good to see you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. And Ramesh Sadeo is an assistant prosecutor with the Essex County Prosecutor's Office, and we welcome him as well. Good to see you, sir.
Good evening.
All right, thank you so much. And I have to say, thanks for turning the host back over to us when we had the technical piece at the start there. So we appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'll be down there as soon as it's over.
All right, thanks so much. So to all of you who are tuning in, we want to just again say thank you. I know I've given a moment as we've done the introductions for everybody to get on here. And if you're streaming this on Facebook Live or anywhere else, you can of course know that we are talking about really the challenges that we are all facing with hate groups here in Montclair, but certainly throughout the state and nation. And through that esteemed panel that I just introduced, you see we've got a diverse group of individuals who are addressing these issues head on, day in and day out. And wanted to hear a little bit from them. I know I've received a number of questions for this webinar today and for this town hall, and I will ask a bunch of those questions. Then, of course, as you have questions, if you're listening at home or mobile, type them in the chat, and we'll try to ask as many questions and get them answered as we can. So first, though, I'd like to start with you, Scott. You know, you're the ADL's regional director for New York, New Jersey. We know that we are at a moment here in time where we're seeing extremists, really feel empowered in so many ways. We've seen what happened at the U.S. Capitol building. That was just, I think, shocking to just all of us and what that really meant where we are. We had, unfortunately, previous individuals in the highest offices in the land who kind of courted that type of mentality, who promoted it in many ways, certainly who gave it a lot of Izzy, I'm not sure if that's you. Mind muting yourself. That'd be great. But gave it a little bit of a larger voice than we've seen in a long time. And from that, we saw the results. So, with that backdrop, I guess I'd turn over to you to say, what are some things that first off, the Anti-Defamation League, what is it that you guys do for people who don't know? What is it that you're seeing and tracking over the last number of years in terms of what I just noted? And then what is it that you maybe refocused or changed because of the challenges that we're facing now that maybe are a little bit different context than we've had before?
First of all, thank you, Mayor, for having me on this esteemed panel. I'm very sorry that the occasion that brings us together, unfortunately, is hate. ADL is an organization that has been committed to fighting hate since 1913, hate in all its forms. Many people associate us with fighting anti-Semitism, which we certainly do, but it's not just about that. It's fighting for justice and fair treatment for all, which means that our mission goes far beyond fighting just hate against the Jewish people. So my area of focus is New York and New Jersey. And ADL has been, of course, observing the scene in New Jersey for many, many years. You're correct. We are in a particular moment here, a moment of great polarization. And that polarization really empowers extremists on both the left and the right. I mean, we should talk about the fact that there are extremists really on both sides. And when there are extremists, it leaves a vacuum. It leaves a vacuum for people to fill. It empowers extremists to say, you on the other side are somehow not worthy, and I'm going to condemn you. And does the same on the other side. What does that do? It means that civil society has a much harder time stepping in and trying to control hate. So what have we seen? The statistics, I think, are pretty clear. ADL has an audit that we've done since 1979 of anti-Semitic incidents, and just focusing on that one particular aspect. In New Jersey, anti-Semitic incidents increased from 2018 to 2019, just the 1 year, 73%, 54% in school-based incidents. Essex, in particular, was in the top quarter of counties with anti-Semitic incidents. And for 2020, which our audit is not yet complete, but we do have a lot of data related to it. There were 11 incidents in Montclair, and 10 of those were white supremacy based. So we're certainly seeing a great rise. And the other thing that we're seeing, and certainly this is very prevalent during the pandemic, we're seeing a great deal of cyber hate. Cyber hate is not just something that people talk about in terms of Zoom bombing. You see cyber hate really every day. We did a survey actually just before the pandemic, which said that 44% of Americans were experiencing some sort of online harassment. 44% of Americans. And that number in terms of severe harassment was 28%. So, what we're seeing is obviously a very troubling situation. And January 6th was not the beginning of the story. This has been going on, obviously, and trending up for many years. But January 6th was a particular moment that really was obviously extremely troubling. And I think if we want to look for a little bit of a silver lining here, I think it's galvanized people. It's galvanized people to want to do something about this because it simply got so bad. And I'll put out there, and we can talk more about maybe in Q&A. There's a big panel here, and I don't want to take up all of the time, but we can talk a bit about some of the solutions and some of the what's already going on in New Jersey that ADL is working on and that we've proposed. But one thing I want to put out there is related specifically to January 6th, and that's something called the PROTECT plan. So PROTECT is an acronym. So PROTECT, each of the letters stands for a step that ADL believes should be taken in response to extremism. Extremism on both sides, extremism in terms of what happened on January 6th. And we feel that the moment is ripe for that because people are so upset about this, so angry. And if everybody just Googles ADL Protect, you're going to find the elements of it, but it's really the whole community coming together. It's legislation, government, civil society coming together, social media, all these different pieces combating hate. And if you go to our website, and you'll also see a way to alert your congressman to support the Protect plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's probably a great segue to Dr. Donnelly Johnson, Faniel, that I want to go to you with. As we talk about civil rights groups and the actions that they're taking, we heard, from Scott talking really on the one side of the hate and the challenges that we're facing and what's being done. But in your work with civil rights groups, and we know that there are many who are really standing tall and pushing back. How do those two things intersect? How does your work, I guess, in terms of working with and promoting the efforts of many civil rights groups intersect more directly with pushing back against hate and some of the things that we've seen? How do those things come together in your experience?
Right. Thank you so much, Mayor Spiller, and to the panelists, especially the community members that are with us today. I think that your question really ties in to the folks that we should be supporting and standing up for. We're in interesting times. You know, there is this global pandemic. We see it as two pandemics, the one for Black and Brown communities, as well as a COVID-19 pandemic that's also seen as a health equity matter that is also related to civil rights. So there's this long global reckoning with racial justice that we're dealing with, but we're also talking about the white supremacists that stormed the nation's capital. And we were told yesterday that it might be happening again. So people are on high alert. They want to know more about civil rights and how their rights can be protected. And I think that's why DCR's new unit, we affectionately call it the CREW, but it is a critical response unit, sometimes a crisis response unit. And the goal of this unit is to really stand up for folks that don't have a voice, that don't have a seat at the table, and make sure that their rights are fought for, and also to advocate for them, to give them the tools to advocate for themselves. Some may not know, but the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights is a state agency, and we are really charged with enforcing New Jersey's LAD. That's the law against discrimination, and making sure that people have a place to call home when they reach out for advocacy assistance. The community outreach unit does just that. And some of the things that we are really targeted on include, of course, race, religion, national origin, disability, as well as pregnancy, gender identity, and so forth. But it goes more than that. We also look at how the LAD can protect against discrimination and bias related to our youth. So we're seeing this upswing when it comes to youth bias, bullying, harassment, and discrimination. Those numbers are more than doubled this year when we look at last year. And so that says that we have a lot of work to do. We're seeing a lot of youth extremists, also youth that are involved in domestic terrorism. And so DCR is actually now focused on some of our youth work, and so glad to partner with organizations like the ADL and the NAACP, but also looking at places of employment, looking at housing, real estate, places of public accommodation in general, and that includes schools. And going into these locations and making sure that people are very clear around the differences between criminal investigations as well as civil rights investigations. So DCR is now celebrating our 75th anniversary of the law against discrimination, and that gives people the voice around specifically their civil rights. And so some of those include what we call taking a proactive approach. So when it comes to community involvement, of course, people know about picking up the phone and filing a complaint if they feel that their rights have been violated on a criminal side, but some don't know about the proactive side. And that includes some of our director-initiated initiatives, also reaching out for some of our training and public education that's open to the public, as well as our strategic arm. So there's so many different elements of DCR. I won't go into all of that here, but I will drop in the chat our website, our contact information, and specifically my email address and phone number so that people can reach out and learn more. But I think the most important part, specifically around your question of community building, is just to have folks know that one, you always have someone that you can connect with through DCR. We have a new online system, NJ Bias, where you can literally file a complaint online. You don't have to fear COVID and going inside and meeting with someone. You can take 5 minutes and file your online intake. In terms of the CREW, our community relations unit, we're also hiring so that we can have staff members that are geographically dispersed throughout New Jersey. That again gives folks allies. It gives someone a direct person that they can contact. And our CREW will go out into the community. We do mediation. We also do community dialogues, town halls such as this one. And again, it's really about connecting with folks and letting them know that they have an advocate and they have a friend in DCR. So I know it's a lot, and I can go on and on and on about this because I'm passionate about it. And this is my life. When we talk about Black Lives Matters, it matters to me, it matters to all of us. But I also think it's really important that we think about family units as a whole as we deal with COVID-19 and specifically health equity. And so you'll hear a lot about health equity in the upcoming months from DCR, especially in April when we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the law against discrimination, and we will be inviting the community to take part in some of those workshops. We're going to be focused on fair housing, youth anti-bias, the LAD, and the future of civil rights. So again, I'll share that information, but Mayor Spiller, I think it's so important, the work that you're doing and that you're bringing folks together. And I just want to say kudos to you, as well as the community partners, for taking on a lot. These are very trying times and we're tired. But even despite that, we push on. So again, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I certainly think we've gotten the bags under our eyes from all the late nights. But in all seriousness, thank you also for just spending the time to go through all of those things that you are offering, that you are doing to help support community actions and community engagement. Because as you're going through so many of the different pieces there, I just can't imagine how many people are listening going, wow, I didn't know that's available, or didn't know there was an opportunity to do that, or try and connect around this issue. So that I think that's one of the best things about really bringing community together at things like this, just to know what's out there, to know what's available. We all know knowledge is power, and making sure that we're educated on these pieces is so important. So thank you for sharing all of those different pieces. As we're hearing with like the community actions and the community work, and of course how that interfaces with some of our public service opportunities and what we're doing, maybe next I would turn it over to you, Detective Chaudhry, to talk a little bit about in your role at the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, what are some of the biggest threats that you see, to public safety in New Jersey from some of the different hate groups that are out there? Maybe how does that interface with what we see here in New Jersey with what's happening nationwide? Is there a lot of connectivity in your experience? Is there not? A little bit separate? And then of course, what are some of the steps that you are taking to kind of prevent violence around any actions that may come? So I guess a multi-part question.
Great. Thanks, Mayor. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for having us here. And also thank you for the community to really engage in this topic, which is definitely an important topic as things have happened during the insurrection on January 6th. And like the doctor had mentioned, it's something that was leading up. This isn't something that just came out of the blue. This is something that's definitely been on the horizon. So to go back to some of the questions that you asked, Mayor. So my role in the Office of Homeland Security is pretty much multifaceted. So one of the core missions of the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security is counterterrorism. So part of that, what we do is that we house what's known as the Suspicious Activity Reporting System. And that's based on the See Something, Say Something. So any type of behavioral situations that you see, you report it to as a private citizen or even local law enforcement. That's reported to our local law enforcement. And what we did was we structured what's known as the Counterterrorism Coordinator program. What that is that every single municipality in the state of New Jersey, which are more than 538 municipalities throughout the state of New Jersey, has what's known as a municipal counterterrorism coordinator. That person takes that information and reports it to the county counterterrorism coordinator. And once that information is taken at the counterterrorism coordinator level at the county, it's then reported to our counterterrorism watch. So what that is, it's a 24/7 desk that's housed in the New Jersey State Police Headquarters. It's our State Fusion Center, known as the ROC, the Regional Operational Intelligence Center. So once that information is taken in, it's put into what's known as the New Jersey SARS reporting system, the Suspicious Activity Reporting System. As soon as that information is taken in, that's automatically reported to the Federal Bureau of Investigation Joint Terrorism Task Force. Since the FBI JTTF has the first right of refusal, they review that along with our personnel. And if it's something that's that they're working on already, they will take that, or it's something if they want to follow up on, they will take that. If not, that information comes back to us. And every single one of these incidents is thoroughly investigated with our county and local partners, meaning that we have a very strong relationship with our county, state, and federal partners, and including our private partners, such as the ADL. I've had a very long relationship with the ADL, Alex Rosenberg, as well as Alana. I haven't met Scott over here yet, but hopefully I will. COVID, it's been a little bit rough meeting people in person, but I'm looking forward to meeting Scott as well. But those relationships are very, very important, and it's important to report this information. Now, on the reporting of the domestic terrorism and what's going on in terms is in the overall threat. So starting back in probably even before 2016, we started to see that there's this huge political division within the country, and I think that's definitively have come and manifested itself as of January 6th. So you started to see a development of a left and right movement, right? So on the left, you have rise of groups such as Antifa, which is anti-fascist, right? And it's a conglomerate of various ideologies, whether it's antisocial, anti-fascist, et cetera, and so on. And then on the right, you had the rise of what's known as the alt-right, the alternative right. So you started to see a huge division in this country, and not just in this country, but in the state of New Jersey. And as time gone on in the last 4 or 5 years or so, those divisions started to really ferment itself. So during this process, in the alt-right side of things, you start to see a movement and that shift in the right? So you seen a rise in white nationalism, right, and white supremacy overall. And there is a distinguishing factor between white nationalism as well as white supremacy. So what do I mean by white supremacy? So white supremacy is your traditional groups, such your neo-Nazi groups, your KKK, where there's an overt, they're white supremacists. They have tattoos of the Nazi swastika. You have various other indications of that involvement and notion of being a white supremacist. What's interesting is that you also have a very much rise in white nationalism. And what that white nationalism is now is almost like an academia intellectual white nationalism, right? It's bringing in folks who are kind of on that fringe, right? Focusing on initially with colleges and universities. And these groups such as Identity Europa, which have changed their names and kind of evolved into groups as European Heritage Movement, which I'll discuss in a little bit, where it's not an overt notion of white supremacy or white nationalism. It's a very subtle, meaning that the marketing side of it is it's okay to be white, right? It's not becoming overt in that sense that I hate white, I hate Jews, or I hate blacks, or I hate certain groups. But it's like bringing in that understanding of it's okay to be white. I mean, how do you argue that, right? So these white nationalist groups are starting to, and have been for quite some time now, marketing that out by using such things as posters, right? So it started out with colleges and universities throughout the nation, and including New Jersey, where they're putting out these types of posters saying that it's okay. And Mayor, as you know very well, that Montclair has been hit quite a bit in the recent few months. And this is what's changing in the domestic terrorism side of things, is that domestic terrorism have taken that playbook from the international terrorism side of things, that radicalization process. So when you look at some of the incidents that have occurred in the last few years targeting groups, whether it's the Tree of Life, it's that these individuals are become self-radicalized, very similar to the incidents that have occurred related to international terrorism, right? You have the husband, which I don't like to make names, the husband and wife in California, or the attack on the gay club down in Florida, where they have self-radicalized based on the ideologies of whether it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Same thing is occurring in the domestic terrorism realm, where these individuals are taking the ideologies of groups and focusing and targeting certain ethnic groups. So because of that, the last year, Director Jared Maples believed that domestic terrorism has risen up, and we've actually elevated that threat here within New Jersey. And that's really what overwhelming notion of that rise of domestic terrorism is occurring. Now, Chief Weldon will kind of explain a little bit more on the rise of biased crimes as well. And I think there's that parallel where there's a rise of biased crimes along with these type of incidents that have been occurring throughout the nation as well as the state of New Jersey. And so what are we doing on the back end? We're really working with all our federal, county, local partners and really curbing it on the investigative side. However, along with the investigative side, it's very important to have that connection with the community. So one of the things our office has done is really pushed our interfaith community outreach program. So back in 2011, we started what's known as the Interfaith Advisory Council. Initially, it was a handful of folks, maybe 24 or so. Started the Interfaith Advisory Council in the sense of bringing that law enforcement component along with the community. In 2018, the Director Jared Maples actually pulled me to help push that Interfaith Advisory Council beyond what it was, which in 2018 was about 250 members. Since then, we have over 3,500 members in the Interfaith Advisory Council. That spans throughout 21 counties, all faiths and religions. And what we do is bringing that focus, not just on the investigative component, but also on that community component as well. And the whole point is to secure the citizens of the state of New Jersey. So, Mayor, did I cover all those answers?
I think you did a pretty good job, and good job remembering to come back to many of those ones there. So nice, thank you. And maybe Detective Powell, I'll turn it over to you because I think that Detective Chaudhry kind of teed it up for you. You know, in terms of, he went through, I think, in great example of detail of, how all the pieces come together, what we've seen, like what the landscape looks like, both in New Jersey and nationally, some of the distinction points between, some of the different groups and their tactics, I guess you will, and how overt or not they may be. I guess my question more to you, and you noted and mentioned, you might have more in this area. What happens when something is reported? All right, let's say, there's something that's seen, or, we've all heard so far, if you see something, say something. We're hearing different examples of things that are popping up, and maybe some people who are on the fringe, on the edge, starting to drift into a space that's a little more dangerous. What happens when something is seen, something is said? What are some of the steps that you guys take after that?
Thanks. First, Mayor, thank you for having me on the program, and also to the distinguished panelists. It's good to be with you guys this evening and our members of the community. But before I answer your question, Mayor, just let me speak for a minute that before you can even address these types of incidents or hate, you have to have a system in place. And in New Jersey has one of the most elaborate and innovative systems for addressing this kind of conduct. And I say it's innovative because it's probably the only system in the nation in which we have a bias incident reporting system. If a bias incident, no matter how small or innocuous, is reported to a law enforcement officer, it automatically comes to the state police, Homeland Security, DCR, every county prosecutor's office in the state, and we're able to take a look at all that information that comes in. Again, this information comes in no matter how small. We look at every single bias incident. Now, before I tell you what we do with that and how we address what we get in, we also have what we call the bias investigative standards. So the AG puts out these standards to all county prosecutors' offices and law enforcement agencies within the state, so that however we're handling bias incidents in Sussex County is the same thing that's being done in Cumberland County. So all the county prosecutor's office, all law enforcement sort of follows the same investigative standards. So to answer your question, when we get a bias incident, no matter how small, we take a look at every single one of them. First, we like the heat map. We like to take a look and see where are our problem areas. So we do a lot of statistical analysis, a lot of analytical analysis on the data on what's coming in, what we're seeing in certain areas, so we can address that particular area. Also, too, when we get a bias incident in, we correspond with the county prosecutor's offices who take the lead on some of these, or most of these investigations, to make sure that if they need assistance from us, we offer that assistance in terms of cyber equipment, knowledge, and things of that nature. But when we get these incidents in and we take a look at them, we correspond with every police department who reported it to us to make sure that we're involved in that investigation. We take a look at it. If they need any additional resources, any resources that the state could offer, we're there. Yesterday, I spoke with one of the county prosecutor's offices, and it was a small incident that sort of turned a little large because there was some press involvement. And I was struck by the resources that particular department put out to investigate this incident. You know, they were able to track down and look at video footage to track down a perpetrator, interview that person, and bring that person in. So when we get it, we want to first take a look at it, see if there's a pattern, any patterns that would lead or tell us that it's involving a larger group. Somebody's orchestrating this activity. If it's small, we still like to address it too. You may get a knock on the door from us. That knock on the door, what that does is that lets that person know that at that level, we're very interested in that conduct. Again, I always say this, we're not interested in press. We're interested in making sure that we stop that conduct at the smallest level, at that most basic level. So if it's name calling or something of that nature, and you get a knock at the door, you know at least the Division of Criminal Justice, the Attorney General's office came out to investigate something as small as that, or they at least followed up with each police department and county prosecutor's office to ensure that there was an investigation being done on that. So that's sort of what we do when we get a report in on a bias incident.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And certainly we here in Montclair know how responsive you certainly are, and how much you partner with our local law enforcement efforts and, of course, the community at large. So maybe with that, Lieutenant Williams, I'll go to you. We've heard already a little bit of the hand in glove that happens in terms of working together, making sure there's coordination, overlaps, so nothing slips, and there's support to help in any way that's needed. What would you speak to or say about what we've seen here in Montclair? What we've done with that information, of course, some of the information sharing that we've heard already. And then what is it that why, maybe you can speak to, I'm sure you all could though, why is it so important for residents to understand that if they do see something, whether it's a big thing, a small thing, that it is reported, that you hear about it, the Montclair police hear about it, and then that information is shared out, and then what actions potentially come from that? So Lieutenant Williams.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And just not to reiterate everything that's already been said, but we start the ball to rolling. Once it comes into us, we initiate the first report, which goes all the way up, as you've heard, to the AG's office through our reporting system. So as the law enforcement agencies come down a notch from AG to prosecutor to the local level, that system is very tight, so that once the initiation starts, it goes from top to bottom and everybody's notified, involved, and apprised of the investigation. Very important for the citizens, though, to let us know, because what we start doing is actually looking at, just like was already previously laid out, we look at patterns. We look at where the hot spots are. We try to identify when these things are occurring and conduct an investigation so that we can find out, because as Chief Weldon Powell alluded to, sometimes just knock on the door to let somebody know that we know what you're doing. We see where we're aware of you, can almost curtail the situation at hand. So it's very important that when we see things that the citizen let us know, so that we can further initiate the process to deal with the situation. And additionally, because a lot of this is, as has been discussed, we've had 11 incidents with one particular group. Well, what they're doing is they're trying to get noticed. They want people to start coming to their site. They're trying to drive traffic so that they can increase their membership. They're trying to recruit. So it's important that we know where these people are putting up their materials so that we can take it down, because we don't want these things to become common. And it's just like anything. I've been a gang investigator in hate crime for over 20 years. And the one thing that we see, as soon as we see it, we want to identify it, we want to document it, and we want to get it down, because we don't want them to continue to put that, their advertisements and everything else. So it's very important that it starts with the citizens, that they let us know, even the smallest thing, we will investigate it as laid out by the AG's office. And then, we report directly to the prosecutor's office, and that system is very tight. So once the ball is rolling, we're able to really get an eye on it and at least be proactive about developing strategic opportunities to try and see who it is, what it is, and why they're doing what they're doing, regardless of, we're not looking to change, we can't change people's minds. People have their own philosophies, but at least if we're aware of where they are, we can curtail any type of more extreme behavior that would somewhat, threaten or make citizens feel uncomfortable. So it's very important that we're notified.
So I think I'll just use that point to reiterate to everybody out there, and that how important it is to make sure that you pick up that phone, make the phone call. I know, as Lieutenant just noted, our police department documents everything, puts it in everyone's inbox, if you will, that needs to be apprised of it, so they can track everything. And then the last part, as he noted, in terms of having the recruitment tool removed, right, is a big piece as well. And I know that. Even in talking with our manager and others, our community affairs office will go out and help if needed to get something down or remove anything. So important stuff as well. So thank you for that. So I guess with that, I'll ask next to our prosecutors who are on. So our Essex County prosecutor and assistant prosecutor. I might go to you in that we've heard a lot about what the community can do. Well, let's back up. We've heard the different groups that are out there. We've heard some of the different styles. We've heard some of the rationale as to what they're doing. We understood what process is then followed when it has an interface with law enforcement, local, county, state level, kind of all the way up and back down, which is importantly conveyed as well. But I guess, and I noticed in the questions that somebody typed this as well, I guess the next question would be, what does a prosecution look like, or what happens with some of this when you have a clearly identified thing that maybe rises to some level, and maybe you can share what that level is, and how hard is a prosecution sometimes, or not as hard. One of the questions in the chat was around Facebook, and noting that so people have become much more comfortable around saying certain things on Facebook and other spaces. At what point does that free speech become something that crosses the line to a level where you both could prosecute or do something with? So I guess that would be the next question that I'd turn over to both of you. I know you guys are both do that work. So I'd ask maybe Mr. Prosecutor, you first, and then we'll go to your assistant prosecutor.
Mayor, first of all, thank you for allowing us to participate in this panel this afternoon. We're always interested in interacting with the community whenever we can, because that certainly aids in terms of the give and take of information. It helps the prosecutor's office do its job much more easily. As Detective Powell indicated, the Essex County Prosecutor's Office is primarily responsible for investigating and prosecuting crimes which happen here in Essex County. Now, that information, of course, and that activity goes on in conjunction with the Attorney General's office, and also after much of the work has been done and brought to our attention from the local police department. We have a great relationship with Montclair Police Department, and so that flow of information is extremely good. And when we get it, then primarily that is handled by our Special Victims Unit, who handles our bias incidents as well. Now, we've had numerous investigations over the years, and oftentimes all the time when Essex County Prosecutor operates, We follow the facts, and then we determine that's how prosecutions are made. And as you can imagine, many of these types of prosecutions are difficult because it takes hard evidence to get to a beyond a reasonable doubt. And oftentimes we've got some cursory information that comes in from either over the internet or from incidents such as some of the stickers that we've seen in Montclair and other places. So prosecuting those kinds of crimes is not always an easy thing. We investigate all that come to our attention, but they're prosecuting and getting to that point is often very, very difficult. So it takes usually some information that goes beyond what we normally get in order to get into a prosecution. And in this case, we're extremely interested in following those leads because everybody knows these incidents of white supremacy and far-right extremism are the growing trend nationally, and they comprise the most dangerous types of bias incidents around the country. We in Essex have been blessed to not have as many as some other places. At the very least, they haven't been reported, but we have not had a tremendous amount of prosecutions because our incidents, fortunately, have not been as high as some other places, even though we're concerned about every incident, no matter how small, and we do follow up on them. Ramesh, you as a resident of Montclair, New Jersey, I would have to defer to you because I know you'd want to say something talking to the citizens from Montclair.
I can tell you the one thing that really struck me was that when FBI Director Wray said that one of the most, I guess, serious threats to our nation now is our white supremacy groups. I think, coming up in the shadow of 9/11, you'd think it would be foreign terrorists and foreign groups that would be the main threat against us in the United States. But when the FBI director came out, and I believe he said that in late December, that the main threat we have now are these white supremacy groups and these extremist groups, it was really eye-opening. I'm born and raised in Montclair. I'm not born and raised. I came to Montclair in March of 1975, so I've been here the majority of my life. We appreciate the diversity of the town. I know Mr. Gill is a graduate from Montclair High School as well, and it's a multiracial, multicultural town where we really tolerate everything. And I was surprised to see that these stickers are appearing. We have a dedicated assistant prosecutor and group of prosecutors actually in our SV unit that concentrates on these. We when we were made aware of this, I guess this movement with these postings in our town, we all looked into it immediately, and we were surprised to hear it. I don't think that represents what we have going on in this town. I think that it's a small group of people. I think that we do have to be super aware of this and cognizant of this, so we can, like Detective Williams said, Lieutenant Williams said, so we can monitor to make sure that this does not spread. The one thing that I am, as he mentioned, I am concerned about is proliferating this. Having young people see these stickers and there's something fashionable about it. Just like gang membership, just like he said, you see gang activity out there, and it gets it's attractive, especially to young people. It becomes fashionable, especially to young people. I do agree with Prosecutor Stevens that I think that overall in Essex, we tend to be a diverse place. We have inner cities. We also have richer, more affluent suburban areas. But I know from picking juries and dealing with the communities, we tend to be pretty inclusive, and we're pretty diverse. So, I think we looked at it today. It appears that we had 52 bias investigations in 2020. A lot of them were I think a lot of them were like vandalisms and graffiti and people writing racial remarks on bathroom walls and things of that nature. They've all been most of them I think have been reported. I think the AG's portal system that they do, where everything gets reported at 4:30, is a pretty good system, so we can see trends statewide. But I know that Prosecutor Stevens is committed to fighting this type of intolerance and these types of crimes. And I think Montclair Police has done a pretty good job. We've reviewed their investigations in terms of these as well. But I just think it takes a community to really stamp out this type of ignorance. And I think it's something that we all should be aware of and that we all should really push back hard against. So.
Well, thank you for that. And I can tell you that we're certainly, really happy that you're in town here.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
We appreciate it, and certainly Prosecutor Stevens as well for always his support. With that, and I see one of the questions in the chat as well. Commissioner Gill, I'll probably turn it over to you for this one. One of our someone well, one of my council colleagues, Bob Russo, has put in the chat, really asking the question about how we prevent extremists, and he mentions a number of them, from taking control of our political institutions and traditionally moderate political parties. I think it probably speaks to a little bit of what we were just talking about what Montclair is, as the assistant prosecutor was noting, what makes it special, how welcoming we are, how diverse we are. But yet, here we still have, an attempted recruitment, people seeing some of these pieces here. We do see the spillover, even, at all levels, into politics, if you will. What would be your response to him, and really more broadly, as someone who's been in public service, helping residents at all levels for so long, what would you say to residents who are listening?
Well, first of all, Mayor, thank you for having me. It's great to see so many good friends, both from our Essex County prosecutor and his office, to the members of our local police department, the members of the Office of Homeland Security, and of course the Anti-Defamation League. I'm honored just to be included on this panel. So first and foremost, thank you all for what you do each and every day. I think I actually, Mayor, had a probably lengthier remarks that I'm gonna hold in the interest of time, because I know we have so many great panelists and they've spoken to this issue, I think, so much better than I could. But first and foremost, we as elected officials and as community members, I think the most basic thing that we can do is speak out, speak up, condemn this type of activity, and denounce it. And that can take many different forms. That can take the form of something as simple as passing a resolution through a non-binding resolution through a local governing body. That can be using our own platforms to make sure that this kind of activity, this type of hate will not be tolerated. I can't say that I was shocked, although I'm as was mentioned, I'm a born and raised Montclairite. Still make my home here with my family. We pride ourselves on being a tolerant community. It's part of our fabric in the history of this township. But unfortunately, we're at a time that it saddens me to say I'm not surprised that we have seen this type of activity, even in a community like Montclair. So to your question, Mayor, is okay, we know where we are. What do? We need to be doing more things like this that promote civic engagement. We need to do everything that we can to educate our neighbors and our community members and how they can participate in this process. There needs to be, in my opinion, more of a focus on civics, just general civics. I don't see that as a partisan statement. I know this is not a forum for partisan politics, but how we get more and more engaged in the governmental process. I remember, and Mayor, you've heard me tell this story many times, the very first time that I was running for public office, I got a question from a local reporter who asked me, since my professional career had only been in government, in public service, well, how could you run for office? You've only had a public sector job, so clearly you're not qualified to do anything. And the message, right, that was basically said was that if you participate in public life, if you participate in government, if you participate in civics, that's not important, that's not something to be valued. And we, I think, as a both as a community, both township, county, and state, need to totally shift that dynamic, in my opinion, because I think it directly relates then how we stand up and ultimately solve the problem of tampering down on this increased level of hate that we see. And that is that government, civics, the political process are something that should be valued, something that we should encourage our young people to want to be a part of, and say that they should be proud to do it. It doesn't mean that people don't abuse the system. It doesn't mean that we might have strong disagreements with people that participate in that system with us on some serious issues, but we need full on engagement in order to step up and really shut these groups down. And I think the educational component is also important as well. So at the county level, at least with the Board of Commissioners and what we do at the county, increasing our anti-bias training for our employees. We have, over the last year, been doing a series of workshops for all of our managers and employees to talk about these very issues, equity training, diversity training. These things are critically important, and we need to do more of that, recognizing and again, using the platforms that we have to condemn any type of this activity. I almost don't even want to repeat the name of the organization, because as the members of law enforcement have said, part of what they try to do here is to create that buzz. And that's clear, to try to recruit people in, to try to draw people in. But at the same time, we do have to be very forceful, immediately respond and say that it's completely and totally unacceptable, and it won't be tolerated. That, as a New America take a very variety of techniques, a very variety of actions that you could take as an elected official, but probably the most basic thing you can do is to speak up, speak up, participate, educate, and we will definitely win the day, so to speak, against this type of hate in the long run.
Thank you. Well, it's important. I think if nothing else, I hope people are getting the theme for a lot of reasons, whether it be elected, whether it be a person in a position of influence speaking up, whether it be someone who sees something speaking up, making sure that we all stay connected around this topic. It's always so important. Looking at one of the questions that somebody sent in, maybe Doctor, this would be, a space that you would be able to help with this answer. One of the questions is around, with the browning of America, there seems to be an all-out power struggle from the extremes. Supporters of extremist views are using voter suppression and other challenges, and the person who puts this says they feel it'll only get worse. So I maybe go to you and your work with civil rights, and of course that encompasses a lot of different challenges for sure, but certainly many opportunities. As we're seeing our state, surely, and nation change, there is that pushback, I guess some would say, right? I think, we saw the counter swing from one of our presidents to another. There's that push and pull that exists. To the question specifically, as the nation changes more, what is it that you're seeing, or in the conversations you're having with civil rights groups and others, what does that, 5-10 years look like, right? As we continue these conversations, what does that, maybe even longer, right? 5, 10, 15 year, plan around the work look like in a changing dynamic?
Right. Thank you for that, Mayor Spiller. And I think it's really interesting as we talk about 5 to 10 years, just to kind of frame this a little bit more very quickly. If you look at the data in 2019, we were looking at about 994 reported bias incidents. That number was a 75% increase of the incidences the prior year. And when we look at it now, it's more than doubled. So we're looking at an increase across the board throughout the state of New Jersey. And so that tells us that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we know that. But it also speaks to what the commissioner said around becoming engaged and making sure that people have a voice. And so related to DCR and the work that we're doing, it's important for us to think about our youth, to really focus on domestic terrorism, youth extremism, and radicalization. and also think about the curriculum development within the schools. So specifically, DCR is focused on hosting white supremacy, white nationalist town halls, but doing them in a forum where youth are actually sitting at this panel. It's great that we're doing this now as representatives of our different organizations, but imagine if we had students that were on the call talking about the bias that they have encountered and talking about how they would combat it. That's going to be awesome when we fast forward 10 years from now and we see those students that are also some of our mentees leading this work. So I think it really starts with youth engagement, giving them a seat at the table, but also providing our parents and educators with the tools to do the work around bias and discrimination. And so again, if you have not reached out to DCR to learn more about that work, I encourage you to do so. Or even give me a call directly. njcivilrights.gov is the website, but it's about all of us coming together and connecting so that we can reduce that number of 994 bias incidents and sort of work to put ourselves out of a job. That's not necessarily a good thing for all of us, but if you think about it, if we do that, that means that we've accomplished that mission and more people in our communities feel safe. So yeah, I think it's about that community and youth engagement.
Great, thank you. Next, and I know that Scott, you have to jump off, but I wanted to kind of go back to you just to talk a little bit about certainly what the ADL does and how the space here in terms of how you can really offer ways to help, right, people to get engaged and help. And I'll maybe let you answer that in the framework of another question that somebody had sent in. And it really relates to an individual or group's feeling intimidated or bullying in any way when they're coming forward with views that are maybe not the majority views around any issue. What is the best way to kind of, come forward, defend against bullying, to kind of express your views, but not feel, pushed out on the outside. So maybe if you could speak to a little of that and then maybe ways that the ADL, more generally kind of helps people with their voice and action.
Certainly. I mean, in terms of the issue of speaking out and having a voice, I mean, I think that it's much more about setting a respectful tone and a civil tone. I forget. I think it was Commissioner Gill who said that. That we need to be able to tolerate all voices. There's not much more to say about that, and we need to call out hate on both sides. I think that was actually the way that I started this. It's not just about hate on one side or extremism on one side. It exists on both, and there should be that sort of tolerance. And in terms of specific actions that are happening right now in New Jersey, and I think it's important to focus on a few things. First of all, legislation. There is hate crimes legislation that exists on the books. But what we're seeing now is legislation against cyber hate. Very, very important. Swatting and doxing are the terms that are out there. Doxing, of course, putting contact information out for people on social media so that others will attack them. And swatting, false reporting of incidents to law enforcement. So very important to support that legislation, which is now in the New Jersey Assembly. Secondly, the Youth Bias Task Force, and shout out to my good friend Denalery and the Office of Civil Rights that really spearheaded this, directed by Rachel Weiner-Apter and of course from the Attorney General's office. So the Youth Bias Task Force was a year-long project in being proactive in ways to create this better society, and came up with 27 recommendations that can be done in the schools that are going to help with this situation. Certainly supporting that. This hate crimes legislation is a piece of that. ADL signed an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the New Jersey NAACP on February 3rd, and we're planning a listening tour. And really the purpose of signing that memorandum of understanding is groups in civil society, civil rights groups coming together and speaking with one voice. We're much more powerful when we speak with one voice, but it's much more than that. It's also about building understanding and respect within our respective communities. And when we go on this listening tour, we'll be speaking out about our understanding of system, from my perspective as a member of the Jewish community, my understanding, my support for Black Lives Matter, and my understanding and abhorrence for systemic racism, and it goes the same way with President Richard Smith of the NAACP. And the last thing I'll mention, and this is something we put forth in a few different places, and even mentioned it to you, Mayor Spiller, is that we've put forth a resolution on extremism, so that communities can express their values against extremism. This is now also with the New Jersey legislature.
Great. Thank you so much, and thanks so much for joining us, Scott. I really appreciate that. I also want to note, I know that one of my council colleagues, Councilwoman Price Abrams, has also noted, and I have to commend her also for her work that she's done with the Jewish Federations of New Jersey. And I know that she's done a lot of work in terms of bringing community together, having conversations, and really living the stand up for one another pledge. So I want to thank her and thank her for jumping in. And I know that she did specifically have a question that she had here too. And she notes, have there been any incidents of in New Jersey of the horrific random violence against Asian people, targeted presumably because of the demonization by some against China, as we've seen elsewhere? That's her question. Would anyone like to jump on that? Maybe from, anyone who might have any information on that.
Mayor, let me just say, we at ECPO, we did reach out for Asian and groups of similar nature in order to determine whether or not there were any reported cases. We've contacted one of the Superior Court judges who's a member of the Asian Law Association. So we're actively soliciting those cases in Essex to see whether or not there is the type of problem, anything closely approaching, and hopefully nothing approaching what's happening in New York and some other places. So just like every other incident where it comes to our attention, we plan to vigorously, one, to investigate that. But I think also it comes to what so many of the other panelists have talked about, the education piece, it just cannot be undersold. We've got to bring that information and teach younger folks who, because one educator once said to me that young people will learn, which is if we don't teach them, they're going to learn it from someone else, from another source. So that we are very happy, ECPO is extremely happy to participate in all educational endeavors in order to, one, determine if it is there, but also to try to educate younger folks that these sorts of activities should not be copycatted. They've got to be just uprooted and dislodged in every possible way.
Well, thank you for that. And I see another question here.
Mayor,
maybe,
I'm sorry.
Please go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor, we have seen a dramatic rise in the number of bias incidents against Asians. Just as the Prosecutor Stevens said, we haven't seen that violence on a larger scale, but we have seen a dramatic rise in the number of bias incidents, and we're starting to take a deeper dive and a deeper look into that. We recently prosecuted a case involving an assault against an Asian family where somebody chased someone down with what was a fake gun, but at the time, the Asian family didn't know it was a fake gun. But we're starting to take a deeper look at that. And we encourage the Asian community to report. There may be some reluctance to report some of the incidents that are out there. So we're starting to, just like I said, just take a look at where we're seeing the most the most bias incidents at. And then we're going to go into those communities and conduct some training to report bias incidents within the Asian community. But I also want to go back real quickly, if I can, to something mentioned earlier by Prosecutor Stevens. Sometimes you may not see the large-scale number of prosecutions. That doesn't mean that we're not effective in what we're doing. That could mean just the opposite. We're very effective at what we're doing, because if we meet that conduct at a certain level, we stop it from rising to a violent crime, a crime in general. So we want to meet that conduct right where it is through the bias incidents. Although there's small reports, like you said, we knock on the door. When there's name calling, it may stop something from rising to the level of something that we don't want to see on a large-scale criminal scale. So, sorry to prolong.
No, listen. Thank you, because that's what we're here, trying to answer these questions and you offer the insight that you can share that certainly others may not be able to. So thank you for that. Much appreciated. I wanted to go to another question that I see here, and maybe Commissioner, I'll go back to you on this one because it relates to a little bit of something you noted before. There's a question really, and it notes about being able to express views that are different than others and not feel attacked or face harassment. But the question really is, can our government and schools anti-bias training? And we all know we've seen at least a greater effort in terms of bias training and understanding of biases. But the question goes back to, can our government and schools anti-bias training and education be extended to social government and political philosophy? What do you think about that in terms of, you noted civics before?
You're giving me the easy ones, huh, Mayor? I think first and foremost that political speech does need to be protected. Opposing views need to be protected, but also at the same time, there are certain things where there can be no disagreements over. There is certain conduct that there can be no disagreements over. And again, I don't make this as a political statement. You and I can have a disagreement over what we might think about universal healthcare, for example, but there can be no disagreement. There is no middle ground on the issue of white supremacy. There is no middle ground on systemic and overt racism or racism in general. Those are just things that have to be called out, have to be stopped, and have to be denounced. That being said, I'm seeing some of the traffic in the Q&A and some of the folks who are asking questions, and I can understand the idea that in a community like Montclair, it's a very progressive community. This is well known. This is a community that has certain identified political leanings, that those who don't have those leanings may feel that they're not allowed to have a safe space to be able to express their views, and that's unacceptable as well. They have to be able to express their views, feel safe to express their views. Those community members and their own children should be able to express their views the same way that we're expressing our views here tonight. I think more, again, I feel lucky to have grown up in Montclair. Not that Montclair had all the answers, or not that the systemic racism doesn't exist in Montclair, because it does, but because there was an approach, at least early on in my own education here, to talk about these issues, to talk and raise them very early, in both from both an educational point of view in terms of history and our own history and what that means, and also from a social point of view about programming that you could participate in that I think really stops hate before it can begin. What I know and believe is that oftentimes hate is taught, it's learned. It's not something that you are, or you were innately born with. So we have opportunities very early on to address, our children and our community to make sure that we're doing everything that we can before we get to the point that we're at now. Just wanted to make one other point, if you wouldn't mind, Mayor, as well, because there's been a lot of discussion tonight about the data and a lot of great laws that we now have on the books in order to help do the work that we need to do to make sure that this type of activity doesn't proliferate. One of the things, though, that I hope to see as a local elected official are also more creative ways for that data to be shared with elected officials and those in community positions, so we can kind of continue this collaboration that we have. And I don't have all the answers to that, issue right now, but just occurred to me hearing all these kind of great things that we're doing at the state level, at the county level, from a law enforcement perspective, and how we come up with more ways to tap both our community leaders, our appointed and elected leaders into that process, and into how we share that data so then we can take meaningful steps also to be part of the solution, and the education component is something that I think we need to continue to do. So we're not just talking about words and rhetoric, we're actually talking about actionable things and actionable steps, that we can each take to try to stop this stuff as soon as it's, reported or found out.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next I might go to, and we'll take a couple more of these here, but I want to go maybe to our assistant prosecutor again, and obviously as a Montclair resident, you noted when you were speaking about what you love about Montclair, what we all love about Montclair, what makes it so special, but also some of the challenges that we're facing. One of the questions that comes in talks about the value of denouncing and condemning. So let's say that, yes, but the question really is does that do anything? Does that really do the words, does denouncing, does that change an ideology? And that's the question. And probably you're suited to answer this because you potentially are in a position to do more than just denounce and condemn. You can prosecute and charge, and so a lot of other things. But speaking to I think the intent of that question of how important is it to denounce and to condemn, and then as prosecutor, how important is it to maybe take some other steps as well?
I think. Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think it is important to denounce and condemn. I mean, but it has to be done it has to be communicated in a rational way that can really reach people as to, sometimes completely turn them off. You don't want to, like I said, I've seen in the chat there in some of the questions and answers, like, well, I'm a Republican and I'm getting picked on because this is Montclair. Yeah, everybody, like Mr. Gill said, everybody is entitled to their opinion. But I do think, some of these groups, some of these white supremacists, some of these really extremist groups, that they can't be tolerated. And in the appropriate case, you do want to prosecute. You do want to prosecute. But I can't stress more, like what the prosecutor said, it's the educational piece. It really nobody's born a racist. Nobody's, you're raised in that way. I remember when I first came, I was in Bradford School. When I first came to Montclair, it was in March of 1975, and the kids were calling me burnt toast, and it was pissing me off. I didn't like it, but I knew. And I went back and I told my mother, and he's like, well, their parents probably, raised them that way, but we're not going to be this way, and I think, you have to condemn that type of speech, but you also have to balance it with education, and like I got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old who are in the public schools in Montclair, Nishuane, Hillside, and I saw what was going on in terms of like what we just did in Black History Month. I remember, I think the first Black History Month I remember doing was the 4th grade in Hillside, at least in my memory. But now it's so pronounced and it's so well done in Montclair that my kids' white friends, they all embrace it, and they're all talking about Kamala Harris and Harriet Tubman and all these various figures, and it's expanded so much, and it's not just like it's not tokenism anymore. So the educational piece is important, but I think we have to start with people at a young age, and that you need that inclusion. So Mr. Gill's father's like the George Washington of education in Montclair. I mean, he's probably the most prolific teacher that we've had in the town, and everybody knows him. He's taught my brothers and my nephews and my nieces and everything like that. And I think he's a great example of that. What we did in Glenfield School, and I think the way that our kids are being raised in Montclair is the right way. So I think the educational piece is the most important thing. I think that what we're doing in this town is a great example of that. And it's kudos to our citizens, but I mean, we've still got a long way to go.
No, appreciate that. I think one thing we all know is that whatever the efforts are, there's always more that can be done. There's always much more, certainly around this issue, that can be done. We're seeing that oftentimes for every, 2 steps forward, there's a step back at times, and we've got to readdress and continue to have the important and sometimes difficult conversations. So I certainly want to.
One additional thing that I will add too is, at least with this Attorney General, he has made it mandatory that all law enforcement, the assistant prosecutors, and all police take implicit bias training, and he really stuck it to us, and mandatory. And I believe that the continuing legal education component for attorneys as well has, it used to just be ethics. Now there's a component for ethics based on bias and an understanding bias, because when we started taking the implicit bias training, it was pretty eye-opening. You wouldn't know. I mean, you'd be sitting there as a prosecutor, and they would give you all these examples and trainings, and I think a lot of people were like, wow, am I treating people unfairly because this guy comes in and he looks one way, and another person comes in with a private attorney and he looks another way, and are they being treated differently? And I think that this focus on implicit bias training that this AG has done has been important to really level the playing field and to really help deal with some of these issues. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, I think it's a great point, and I think it actually spills into a little bit of what you were also noting, and so many of others have noted as well. I mean, that's a form of training, a form of education, right? To making sure people are aware of something, right? Those implicit biases, that's the point, right? You're not really, aware of many of the things that you're looking at you're through your lens. But I think also, kudos to our governor, who has really also come in and really pushed forward to, we talk about, you mentioned your children's experience, but the Amistad curriculum and finally ensuring and making sure that it's not just like 1 month of teaching Black history, right? But infused into the curriculum and the conversation as appropriate. So I think that's important steps too. Education's a big piece. We're seeing at the national level also, to your point, where we have a president who's saying, look, I want everything looked at least through the lens of what are some of the biases that exist, what are some of the challenges around race and some of the other pieces, everything through those lenses. It's important to at least recognize where the blind spots are potentially as a society, nation, and certainly as various institutions, and then try and address those pieces. So certainly agreed. Just a couple more really quick ones here, and thank everybody for staying on. I know with technical piece we got a couple minute late start, so we stayed over here a little bit, but maybe I just want to kind of wrap it up, and I'll go around the horn very quickly, just with any final things that anyone wants to share. But I want to start with you, Lieutenant Williams. I want to go back to you because look, people who are tuning in here, people who are listening, mostly many from Montclair. Kind of bringing it back home, if you will, to Montclair. We've talked about the value of education, the understanding of why it's important to report, the need for that inclusive space and the conversations. From your perspective in law enforcement, I also know, you're unbelievably engaged in the community, with the community on so many levels. How do you see the climate, I guess? How do you see climate right now in the township? Yes, we're talking about a group that's trying to recruit and do certain things. We're talking about, we're impacted, of course, by national politics, so many things. But as you are out there and a big participant in and really a pillar in the community policing efforts that we have, what are you sensing in terms of the community and the status now?
Okay, well, man, what I would like to say is, for Montclair, with our inclusiveness, our blessing can also be our curse, because we so welcome everything and everyone and every walk of life. That's why you see that we're a prime target for somebody like these particular groups to walk in our town, or even to live there, to come in and try to present a different side. So our inclusiveness sometimes is good, and then it can also be a little thorn in our side. And additionally, the other thing I like to just make sure that people understand is, when we talk about the education piece, it's not just about who these groups are, and because we have to remember that people have First Amendment rights. Belonging to a hate group is not against the law. And a lot of times people will call us and say, what are you guys doing about this? Are you arresting somebody? And it's really, people have rights, and there has to be an investigation. There has to be probable cause. There's certain things that have to be met before there can be any type of arrest or prosecution. So it's not as easy as you don't like what somebody said. I'll give a good example. My phone rang off the hook when during the election time, when the Trump parades were going around town and people were all up in arms. But realistically, they have the right to do that, because just conversely, we did have the Biden camps going through town also. So as much as we want to make sure that we're proactive in identifying what we have, where we have, and the potential, and minimizing the potential for things to grow out of hand, we have to remember that in our community, we are inclusive, and we have to respect other people's right to have a difference of opinion. But on the same token, nobody should be in fear or feel that they're threatened or they can't be free to be who they are. And if that is the case, then we are there to make sure that people aren't crossing the line. And please let us know, because we much rather deal with it at the lowest level than let things get up to a point where now it's really a problem. The good thing is, and one of the things I'll say is kudos, is everybody on this call with regard to law enforcement, we've been in touch with over the last couple months, and everybody's communicating to make sure we have a handle on what's going on. So as long as the general public can make sure that the information gets to us in a timely manner, we can't stress that enough. If you see something, say something, because we've talked to the AG's office, we've talked to our county prosecutor, and we've been in touch and talking about this situation to make sure that we have a good handle on it, and we're watching it so that it doesn't grow into something that's beyond our control.
Excellent. Thank you for that kind of cap there. Chief Detective Powell, any quick pieces that you'd want to share that maybe we haven't touched on, or just a point of emphasis that you'd like to close us with as well?
He kind of stole my thunder, because he said everything I kind of wanted to say, the importance of reporting. But the most important thing that he said is, this is not the first time we're meeting each other. We all kind of know each other. We work together. And that reporting system is just so paramount. It's extremely important. And I know that at times, some of the local police departments, they're inundated with other things, and then they have to report this basic name calling session. But it does allow us to derive some information from that and data from that. We work with the Division of Civil Rights. So we're not strangers to each other. But if I could leave the community with one thing, it is extremely important to report. Again, you may not see large prosecutions on things that are very difficult. Bias crimes or bias incidents are one of the most difficult things to prosecute. However, we take every single one seriously. We look at every single one. We have analysts dedicated to looking at every single one that comes in. We try to do analytical work so we can put the pieces of the puzzle together, so that we make sure that we're not missing a bigger incident or some orchestrated activity against a segment of the community. But I also want to thank you for having me on this panel. And I also want to thank the community members that joined us this evening. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think to your point of the prosecutions are one thing, but all that information also help prevent, right? And that's an important piece too. What
it certainly does.
Way,
and I can't emphasize that enough. And if I just may add too, there was a situation where someone said something that wasn't necessarily a crime, but it was enough that it raised a level of attention. And after the knock on the door, we never heard from a certain segment of that community again. So, again, that's just things that we do. We take it all serious. That knock on the door may have prevented the next stage in that level of hate. So, again, thank you.
Thank you as well. Detective Chaudhry, anything you'd like to close us with?
Thanks, Mayor. I really appreciate it. No, I'm good. I think everybody covered everything. If anyone has questions, by all means, reach out to me.
I think that's that we're all mentioning here today. This isn't the end of any conversation. This is just an information sharing opportunity here for you at home to be connected with all the the important work that's going on in many different places. So I noticed in the chat and other places, Dr. Others have put their information in there. So reach out anytime. And certainly we're always here to have those conversations. Dr. Johnson, would you have anything you'd like to close out with as well?
Sure. Again, I just want to thank you, Mayor, for the invite, and just let people know that DCR investigations fully focus on harassment that rises to the level of hostile environment. So again, this can be your employer, it can be a housing provider, places of public accommodation. But in addition to that, DCR partners around mental health. So a lot of our work is around trauma-informed practices, as well as restorative justice and mediation. So it's more than just the law, it's also about that level of self-care and wellness that I think we don't always pay close enough attention to. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to the Division on Civil Rights, because as mentioned, we're all a family here on this call, but we do work in different arenas to support the whole person. So again, that number is 1-833-NJ-DCR4U. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate that and all the information that you brought to this. You're really, really helpful. I'll go back to our assistant prosecutor. Any closing pieces here for Montclair, and maybe what's the best way for people who do want to reach out? Do they reach out right to your office, or if they've got a concern or question or they want to say something, what do they go local law enforcement first? What's your thought on that as
first, I'd like to thank all the members of the community and all the members of the panel who participated in this. This was very informative and very good. Typically, at least is what in my experience, most bias incidents are reported to local law enforcement. As you could hear from Lieutenant Tyrone Williams, he's on it. They have specialized training and they're very good. Most of the incidents that we have are going to be reported within 24 hours and will be reviewed by members of the SVU, our bias prosecution unit. So usually they'll stay. They'll be reported. The prosecutor's office typically we're not like a patrol division. We're essentially attorneys that review and manage cases that are investigated and presented to the courts. For the most part, the local law enforcement agencies will deal with reports of bias investigations, but they'll generally get reviewed by an assistant prosecutor within a 24-hour period. So you can rely on your local law enforcement. We have excellent policing in Montclair and elsewhere throughout the county. But if there's a need to call us, we can be contacted. Our direct number is 973-621-4700, and we're in Newark.
Well, thank you for that. And I noticed a couple questions earlier, and you had noted it in something you answered earlier, but there's multiple sets of eyes on something here, which I think is an important thing as well.
Absolutely.
Things from different perspectives, maybe missing something, maybe a bias, right? Or whatever else that is, having multiple different levels, kind of take that independent look at things is a very good thing, very healthy thing. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And thanks for being on. Really appreciate it. Commissioner, did you want to close out with anything on your end before we run off? I see it looks like he probably just stepped away from his piece here. Well, while he's doing that, I don't know if I know that our prosecutor had to step away for a moment. I'm not sure if he's here to close out with anything, but if not, all right. Well, listen, I want to close out by saying this. I want to thank all of you for really taking the time. I know that you all have very busy schedules. I know what it took to kind of put some of this together and to kind of work around everyone's time to get here. And you guys gave that time, gave generously of the time, but really to allow so many residents to be heard, ask the questions, hear from you as to what is happening, what you're doing about it, what we collectively can do about it, why it's important to do certain pieces. So I think really informative and really the start of an important conversation and a connection point to so many different resources and opportunities for good work. So I want to thank you again, really appreciate the work that you do. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service to our community and beyond. And certainly hope that we can connect again on various pieces as needed. But I also know that each one of you has helped making a positive difference in our community. So on behalf of all Montclair residents, I want to thank you. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to all of you at home who've tuned in. for this town hall edition. Really appreciate you taking the time to make sure you're informed on the issues and interfacing and interacting with the public servants here to serve you best. So thanks so much, everybody, and have a great night. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.